good news for those who believe in reproductive rights in the state of Michigan. A proposal to protect abortion rights in the Mitten State is now back on the November ballot. Now, this is thanks to intervention from the state's Supreme Court. So now, before I get to what the proposed amendment would do, let me tell you how we got here. So back in July, there was a massive petition drive that ended up garnering about 750,000 signatures from across the state in order to codify reproductive rights in the Michigan State Constitution. Now, obviously, that's way more than they actually needed to put this on the measure, to put this on the ballot. And so they took it to, the court, or they took it to the elections officials. And it turns out that got shut down. Opponents of the measure said the petitions happened to be invalid because of what was basically a series of typos, spaces between some of the words that were not readily visible, thanks to a glitch in some of the printing. The opponents claimed the petitions were then incomprehensible and thus not valid. Two Republicans who sat on the Michigan four-person election board agreed and voted against authorizing that amendment. So now the proposed amendment, of course, would codify reproductive rights currently enjoyed by women in Michigan, women and trans people, non-binary, etc., and would basically not allow a 1931 law that prohibits abortion at any stage in pregnancy in almost all circumstances. Now, that was one of the laws in the books that, of course, would have come into effect following the ruling of the Supreme Court that struck down Roe. Now, that has not went into effect yet because it has been blocked by several lower court rulings, several injunctions that have prevented prosecutors from bringing cases against doctors who have performed those abortions. But they have been appealed. Now, the only way to really, of course, protect reproductive rights in Michigan is to codify them, and that's where, of course, this petition came into play. So, that said, after this was blocked by the four-person election board, supporters of the amendment then asked the state Supreme Court to intervene, arguing that the meaning of the amendment was clear even with the compressed words, and that the election board had no authority to block an initiative when it so clearly had overwhelming public support. And on Thursday, the court agreed and ordered the election board to certify the amendment. So now look, before I get into more details, understand that the opponents of this, people who want to block abortion, who want that 1931 law to be applied to every pregnant person in the state, how desperate they are to get this, to not give people an opportunity to do direct democracy in the form of a ballot initiative to protect their bodily autonomy. They use the excuse of, oh, there wasn't enough space in between words. Oh, incomprehensible. We can't read it. Well, just because you can't read it doesn't mean no one else can. It's amazing that they would use this ridiculous excuse when you have such a clear, again, people understood. I signed the ballot measure. I read it. I didn't have a problem with it. So, like, I've had a look at it. I could read it. Not a problem. And so did, again, 750,000 other Michiganders. Now, the vote on the 7-member court ended up being 5-2. And in a brief unsigned opinion, the majority explained that the meaning of the words had not been changed by the alleged insufficient spacing between them. And now there was an even better majority opinion, and this is a concurring opinion written by Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormick. You're going to love this. She said 753,759 Michiganders signed this proposal, more than have ever signed any proposal in Michigan history. Noting that the challengers produced no evidence that any voters were actually confused by the wording, McCormick accused those opponents of trying to disenfranchise millions of Michiganders because they think that they have identified a technicality that allows them to do so. A game of gotcha gone very bad. Well, look, that's the thing. It's all the anti-abortion opponents have. I'm sorry, the people that support, banning abortion. That's all they have. What they want to do is strip people of their rights based on some of the most technical and inane arguments. They don't want to do it based on the merits, and they don't want to do it based on the will of the people, because the vast majority of people do not agree with banning abortion completely, without exceptions. And so, look, most of the country supported Roe. The vast majority of the country does not believe that government should be forcing people to carry pregnancies. And by the way, Roe, the way that it was set up, did allow the government to have an interest in protecting fetuses that were viable and could survive outside the womb. In reality, Roe was actually the compromise position, and actually the better position, because it still allowed states to impose certain restrictions after a certain point. And again, that point being viability. But as I said before, and I'll keep saying it, this was never about being pro-life. It's always been about control. It's always been about power over women's bodies, power in political power, because they had been running on this for a very, very long time on these so-called pro-life platforms. And look, that's really why they didn't want this position on the ballot at all, because of the possible political consequences of it. Recently, Republican politicians, look, they fucked around, and now they're finding out. All right?
They are about to find out.
And they are. They have seen races that have played out really, really badly over the issue of abortion, where you had Democrats taking the pro-choice position and doing so very strongly in elections. And then, you even had ballot initiatives, amendments here in Kansas, for example, that kept the right of choice for women, for pregnant people. So, if an amendment to make sure to protect the right of people to get abortions can win in a place like Kansas, well, that really was the wake-up call. Oh, look, we better back away from this position. We might want to take a more moderate position, which again also shows how a lot of them really viewed this issue. Not about being pro-life. If you can moderate your position to go, oh, you know what? I never really said I was 100% pro-life. It's going to be abortion completely. No. Well, then you weren't pro-life to begin with. Again, about power, about control. So now one of the races, by the way, is that is going to be impacted by this now is the Michigan gubernatorial race. Now that's between Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon. Now, Gretchen Whitmer is pro-choice. She's very clear about that. Tudor Dixon is insane. In fact, in a July interview, she was asked by podcaster Charlie McDuff, which, by the way, that's kind of a cool name. I'm Charlie McDuff. Now, she was asked by McDuff a question about exceptions for rape and incest that, and if Tudor Dixon would support them. He said, the question would be like a 14-year-old who, say, is a victim of abuse by an uncle. You're saying, carry that. She then called it a perfect example because I know people who are the product. A life is a life for me. So again, you're going to force a teenage girl who was raped by a family member to then be forced to carry that fetus to term, have that, and then have the baby. That's horrifying. And in August, when given a chance to follow up by Fox 2's Rup Raj, Dixon did not change her position. She said, I talked to those people who were the child of rape victim, and the bond those two people made, and the fact that out of that tragedy, there was healing through that baby. Healing. So look, Tudor Dixon has taken an extremist position. and one that is clearly not popular in the state. In fact, according to recent polling, 60% of Michiganders now support this ballot measure, and it also found that it was the top factor motivating voters to the polls, polling ahead of inflation, education, and crime. So that's like the number one issue now is protecting reproductive choice among Michigan voters. Not so good for Dixon, who, by the way, recently had a pretty hilarious tweet saying, "Well, now that that it's on the ballot, you can vote for that and then vote for me." Well, what would be the point? I mean, seriously, that's a bizarre message. Oh yeah, you can totally support this ballot measure to enshrine reproductive choice that I'm totally 100% against, and then you could also vote for me. Fascinating. But once again, it just shows you the impact that this discussion, this abortion issue is having in these races all over the country, and how important it is, to people to protect their own bodily autonomy.